Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are going to look at the ground forces portion of the Q&A from today, so let's get into it. The first question is the position of ammunition unlocks being reconsidered? Examples of unequal distribution would be the Leclerc and the Type 90. These tanks have to unlock their most powerful APF-SDS ammunition, which is placed at Tier 4, using the recently adjusted DM12 shell. Comparable tank unlocks, their APF-SDS ammunition in low tiers, are provided with APF-SDS ammunition in stock configurations. And the answer is yes, it is possible and planned for it to happen for vehicles of rank 6 and 7, which has the default heat shell. So they are going to be moving the APF-SDS so it's easier to get, which I suppose is nice for these vehicles. It would be nice if all of those kind of really nice modules such as thermals, engine upgrade, artillery, even, APF-SDS, all were moved to rank 1, so therefore, the grind of the vehicles is a lot easier. My main thing when it comes to a lot of this is I think there needs to be a fundamental change in how the reduction of modifications happen. Right now, what we have for these vehicles is a reduction in parts and FPE. Everything else is stayed standard. I would much prefer a system be introduced where you can pick which modifications you would like reduced, whether it's 2 modifications, whether it's 3 modifications. Maybe you get to choose 1 modification per tier or per, rank of modification tiers that you are able to reduce. Then I think this would be completely fair. So when you get a vehicle, especially a rank 6 or 7 vehicle, it pops up the modification screen. It just says, hey, you've just unlocked this vehicle. Which modifications would you like reduced? Because there are a lot of vehicles, especially at high tiers, or high ranks, sorry, which I would much prefer to get other modules reduced than parts and FPE. Parts and FPE for me, in a lot of times, are kind of superfluous, because normally if you get hit at high tiers, there's going to be a lot of times where you are nearly dead or going to die because you have just been pinged on the map, everybody knows where you are, and you've also just been shot in the face, so you're going to have taken damage. So having, parts and FPE is a lot less useful than something like Commander's Thermals or Gunner Thermals or APF-SDS in the case of what we're talking about. So I think giving more of an onus on the player to be able to pick the modifications they reduce would be a good way forward for this idea. The next question is, are there any considerations underway for the M833 ammo for the M1 IPM1 and the L26 for the Challenger 1 Mark III and the L27 for the Challenger 2 respectively? The answer is we plan to add the M833 shell for the IPM1. The British Challenger 1 Mark III and Challenger 2 don't need a new shell yet, as the statistics show. So this is just telling me that people are not performing as well in the IPM1, or maybe they're struggling to kill things with it, so it's going to get a little bit of a buff with the M833. The M833 is something that people have been asking for a long time. I don't really know why. The fact is, all you have to do is plug in all of the values into the Lanz Odermatt formula, and you can find out, what the penetration statistics are going to be on the round. We'll see if it makes any difference to the IPM1. The problem that the IPM1 has is the same problem a lot of those vehicles have. Why would I play an IPM1 when I can play an M1A1 and an M1A2? They just seem like better vehicles. So it's just kind of left in the dirt. And it's a problem with the game in general, with the idea of power creep, but it's not something you're going to change because of how, the game works. You have to keep adding to the top tier, and the time when stuff like the IPM1 and the M1 Abrams will come to the floor again is when you have a scenario where they'll drop out of that top range of BRs, which they will eventually do. So then we have a bunch of simulator questions, which is kind of interesting. So the first question is, can you tell us if you plan to improve the quality of composition of ground battle lineups in simulator to remove the issue of the same vehicles facing each other? Which is, in my opinion, an issue. The answer is technically it is impossible to make the ground vehicles of one nation fighting on 2 teams at once. Currently, there is a mechanic that allows you to query the location of an ally, and so allows you to determine if you have an ally or enemy in front of you. In addition, the vehicles of different nations have different camouflages, and in the case of Italian tanks, also additional identification marks, which also help determine the ownership of the vehicle. We don't plan to remove similar vehicles from the setups, because players who are researching specific game nation trees will simply lose the opportunity to play in SB mode. I think that's fair. It is... I mean, you know how you fix this? And I talked about this a while back with a bunch of people, and I don't know why this is such a controversial thing. Why don't you just remove team killing from SB? Or why don't you just remove, like, you know, firing, like, main gun team killing from SB? I mean, they already did it in ground realistic. They did it for a time in air realistic. The idea that you have this simulated experience in ground, and for some reason you can't have you have to have team killing as a core thing that is there in the game. I don't really understand why, but that would pretty much solve this issue straight away. If you really wanted to solve it. And to all the people who want, like, you know, the proper simulator experience, you can go and play Steel Beasts and have fun with that. So when it also comes to, I disagree with the fact that they added a bunch of American vehicles to all of the tech trees. I thought that this issue would arise where you basically just have similar vehicles which are fighting each other, and just like, you know, top tier aviation, and they talk about how, you know, the idea of homogeneous compositions, right? Well, surely you've added more homogeneous compositions to this because of the fact that you've just, you know, added the same vehicles over and over again. So yeah, I disagree with the addition of them, especially the reason why they added them, which was supposedly to bolster lineups. There were some of them which were added which just didn't do that. And as we all know, you can bush up vehicles, you can get rid of markings, and then, or they can just add in, they can add in skins like they did for the T-34, the captured German T-34, which makes it look way more like the Soviet T-34, which was just a wonderful move. Jesus. And then added, you know, it's in simulator battles. I just think, just take away those vehicles from sim battles. It's as simple as that. If you really, as I said, you're either going to have to go harsh one way or harsh the other. And it's either take the vehicles out, that fixes the issue straight away, or what it does, or, as I said, remove team killing. And you just, this no longer becomes an issue. People bitch about it for like 2 days, and then everybody moves on because the ground sim community is so small compared to the rest of the game. Or I should say compared to ground realistic, ground arcade, air realistic, and air arcade. The next question is, when will old SB mode be back, and when will the RP test be over? The answer is the new RP system works fine. This mode has become more popular, and we'll keep it. The test is over indeed, but we're still working on the win rate adjustments for every vehicle setup. So, the new king is in. Goodbye, old system. Welcome, the new system. It's nice to see that it has increased the popularity of SB mode. That is, you know, a wonderful thing. Now, hopefully, it can work on the vehicle variety, since like the problem with sim mode is, you know how I talk about a lot with realistic battles, and the fact is, you know, people want to win, people want to play the meta. This is like amplified in SB mode by a lot. So you just see the same vehicles over and over and over again, and you see everybody queuing for one side because, well, they want to win. So yeah. The next question is, why was the RP mode implemented for SB mixed battles, having vehicle setups obviously unbalanced? That is just a awfully worded question. The answer is the balance of setups is constantly a work in progress and can only be completed if the addition of new vehicles and new weapons for old vehicles stops. Each major update introduces new tanks and aircrafts that have an impact on the win rate. The system of RP respawns is aimed at improving the balance, not only from a statistical point of view, but also for gameplay, because after the loss of a certain type of vehicle, it allows you to take another, more suitable for the situation. At the same time, by changing the cost of the respawn, you can reduce the influence on the victory rate of some vehicles. Why Why does this question exist? Like, isn't it like you can just look at why Ground RB has like the RP mode. That's it. And you can ask why they've done that. Because you need vehicles for different situations. And if vehicle setups are unbalanced, then they need to, this is like a process I talk about a lot. So when a vehicle is initially introduced, human error is going to be abundant. That means in the form of its like BR, its rewards, its win rate, and all of this. So whoever makes that initial decision on what BR this vehicle is going to be, that is going to be human error, right? Because there's going to be issues with it and the stats may show something different. If you want examples of this, the Sturm S is a great one. Chrysanthema is another one as well. There's a bunch of other vehicles. The SU-57B is probably the best example of this, where you have somebody at Gaijin who has made a decision that, or a group of people have made a decision that this is the BR of that vehicle and this is what it should be. And then what happens is that vehicle gets annihilated, or it does way too well and they have to adjust the BR based on the statistics. So the idea, you remember the idea where people would talk about they need like a thought council to work all of these things out, and when it comes to, all the BRs and stuff, they already do that, which is why, it's so dangerous thinking about having this like thought council thing to work out all the BRs, because that is basically the initial step of what they always do with these vehicles anyway. So yeah, it's just something to note for this question. This question is not a good one. The next question is, why is the test going on for all SB setups? What? Why do you think? Just think for like 2 seconds why this may happen across the board. The answer is the RP system has been implemented for all setups in order to receive win rate change data as soon as possible, and allowing us to react to these changes quickly. Besides, by simultaneously enabling the RP system for all setups, we have an opportunity to get precise data for analysis and changes between old and new SB modes. Yeah. If they do it across the board, they're going to get more data, so they're going to be able to react quicker, so they're going to be more changes, and therefore they can create a quicker, balanced game mode, if you want to come at it from that point of view. I thought that would be obvious. I'm guessing not. The next question is, why did you implement the new system without any changes from last testing session, without taking into consideration previous feedback? I saw a lot of that feedback. It wasn't very good. The answer is, when developing the current system, not only the feedback from the previous player testing was used, but also the statistics and online data, which showed the audience's interest in this format. The number of battles are now slightly higher than under the old respawn system. In previous tests, the mode was based not only on the respawns for the RP, but also on the allied markers on the minimap. This innovation drew the most criticism from the players, who perceived it as a way to deal with team killers, and not as a team interaction. At the same time, we believe that this is one of the weak points of the mode, because when respawning, the player can no longer understand where the battle is taking place, what tactics need to be applied, and in what areas he will be more useful. Adding markers to the minimap does not make it easier and faster to identify enemy vehicles, but it allows you to be more useful for your team. That is very true. You can, if you know where your allies are, which technically in a simulated environment you would do because of radios or flags or hand signals or whatever you want, it means that if you know somebody is watching that corner over there, then maybe you can watch the other corner. Whereas if you don't know where your allies are and you're just completely blind to everything, it's really hard to work out what is going on the battlefield. You feel very much lost. Another thing to also note is this idea of the feedback stuff. So, one of the funny things about feedback is you always have the silent majority who doesn't really give feedback because they're content with the situation. Like, if you are asking for feedback on a change to something, the majority of feedback you're going to get is probably going to be the people who are going to criticize it. And the people who like it are just going to be sat there and be like, ah, well, it's good, so I don't really have any feedback, right? And this can give a negative outlook on, like, the actual thing itself, even if it isn't the majority of the community that dislikes it. All it takes is a few very critical people to make it look like it's a very negative experience, even though it isn't. You could have, if you have 10 people in a place and 9 of them are just content with the situation, they're just going to be sat there and just, relaxing. Where if you have one person who doesn't like the situation, they're going to be screaming, making a bunch of noise, and, making a bunch of stuff going on. So you're going to focus on that one individual, which is why you've got to be very, very careful in these situations by listening to stuff like just basic feedback. You have to have other stuff involved with it, because otherwise you end up listening to the vocal minority and screwing it for everybody else, and that vocal minority gets their game, but everybody else has already left by that point because you've destroyed the game that they actually enjoyed. So yeah, I see this a lot. And also the other thing is, people who will complain about something and then they'll come up with a solution, and then the solution is installed, and then they'll complain about that solution even though it's exactly what they said 3 months ago. Or what'll happen is they'll ask for something like Cold War in World War mode, and then they'll get Cold War in World War mode, and then they will say over and over again, this is not the Cold War I wanted in World War mode, which is just mind-boggling to me, and very frustrating. And it shows, as I've said many times, that there are certain people in this world that you cannot please. And you know what you have to do with those people? You have to walk the other way. The next question is why in some top-tier setups the heavy tank costs are designated medium and some SPGs like the Ferdinand as heavies. Why do you think? Just think about it for like 2 seconds. These questions are really asinine. The answer is in top setups, the cost of heavy tank respawns was equated to medium tanks and MBTs, because they no longer provide the same protection against any type of shell as a medium tier. This is true for 822 and 92 setups. For the 82 setup, we return the respawn cost of 450 HP to improve the win rate. At the same time, some vehicles might have an increased cost of respawn. For example, the Ferdinand is equated to heavy tanks, because despite the lack of a turret, it has good armor and is protected by most tanks at its rank, as well as the Jumbo, which had the highest efficiency in its setup and brought an imbalanced in battles. Yeah. They're literally, so the way that they do these costs is they do it by vehicle type. So therefore, if you have a vehicle which is overperforming, they want to give it a higher cost, so therefore they have to change its type of vehicle. It's just like how I think, is it the ADATs? Like, these are all things which happen in ground realistic. Like, they just moved the system over. And now we're having to, I don't know, answer questions which are fundamental and have been in the game for like 6 years, and people should just know these things. Like there's a lot of vehicles, like the ZSU 57-2 was a classic. I don't know if it still is nowadays, but the ZSU 57-2 used to have like the same spawn points as like a tank destroyer or a medium tank, even though it's an AA. And I think the ADATS has the same thing, because the fact that those vehicles are like multi-role and they have the tank killing capability, they're going to have a higher SP cost. It's the same. It's exactly the same in. It's exactly the same in Simulator. It's really weird. Just like, I feel like a lot of these questions can be answered if you just think about it for 2 seconds. Like, why would they do this? The next question is, why can't you change mounted weapons on an aircraft or helicopter on an airfield without losing the RP? Decent question. The answer is, changing the type of mounted weapon without losing RP would allow a player to respawn infinitely, ruining gameplay for others. Leaving the vehicle is now equal to losing it. Now every player has an equal amount of RP before the battle starts, allowing players to estimate and plan how many times they'll be able to face the enemy. So pretty much what that means is, I don't know how that actually answers the question. Why can't you change mounted weapons on an aircraft or helicopter? I mean, changing the type of mounted weapons without losing RP would allow. I mean, you can just if you land and repair and rearm, you can respawn infinitely, right? Just with that loadout, or does it cost more SP? Because I know in ground realistic that's what you can do. So maybe they're worried about that. I don't know. It seems a little bit odd to me. But if they're trying to make it so stuff like aviation is not as powerful in ground, then obviously this is a good way to do it. Because it means that because it's much harder to kill a, let's say, helicopter, especially a Ka-50, in a tank than it is to kill a tank in a Ka-50. You see what I mean? So therefore you have to try and balance them out by some sort of respawn system or some sort of spawn system. And that's basically what they're trying to do. It's nice to see a ton of changes for SB over this year, though. Seems like they're really working on it a lot. And if SB players are confused about how the systems work, I'd just take a gander and have a look at ground RB, because that's what they're trying to model it off, with a few changes such as the lineup things, so it will make a lot more sense to you. The next video, we'll have a look at helicopters. We'll also have a look at naval and miscellaneous. See you next time. I'd like to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Battling Bacon, Blackie, Chris Giltnane, Conte Baraka, Daniel Stanton, Elove Goat, Jay Wilt, Martinez, Trigger Hippie, Universe, Eugens Terry, and also I'm Devilish and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.